Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. In today's Friday morning ramblings, we're going to walk through the entire garden. I'm going to talk about things that were successful, look at trellising, talk about fall crops, and we're going to talk about all this ginger growing in here. This is a sponsored video. Today's video is sponsored by the original Muck Boot Company. I highly recommend them. They'll make perfect holiday gifts. I've been wearing my Outscapes just about every day. They are super comfortable, really functional, especially if you are slinging fish emulsion around. These are so comfortable, I even wear them when I go out to the store. This is ginger. Now, this is absolutely, what do I want to say? I can't say amazing. I want to say producing growth. This is what I lacked last year. Just this really productive upper growth. And that's what's going to get you nice ginger rhizomes. Now, I will link the video that showed you how I started these indoors. And my tip for ginger is they need a good 6 months of growing above the ground. That means if you drop ginger in, especially in Maryland Zone 7, you don't want 2 months of your warm season to be used for this to start sprouting. So if you sprout ginger indoors for a good 2 months and then bring it out here when the temperatures are right, this is going to get a solid 6 months of growth. And when I harvest this, there's going to be just wonderful rhizomes. So the whole key to ginger, and I want to stress that because that was something I was struggling with last year, is really getting nice growth, is to start it indoors. 2 months growth, 6 months here in Maryland Zone 7, you're going to have beautiful ginger. I'll be harvesting that later this month, as soon as the frost rolls in. This is a cattle panel arch. 2 of them on the right are muscadines, and people have been asking me how do I grow them. There's nothing fancy. They grow like grapes, and they're just right in the ground, right. One's right there, one's right there. Didn't do any kind of soil prep. Just dug a hole, put them in. This is 3 years later, growing extremely well. They're gonna have to get cut back. On the left side, I have my beans and my cucumbers. Next year, I'm not gonna trellis anything up here but for the muscadines. I'm going to let them grow. And this is what they look like. You can see all the little grape-like fruits. And you just let them grow until they're soft to the touch. They're sweet, they do have seeds, but just look at the vine. I mean, it's nice and solid. And I cut this back pretty harshly, and it grows really well. So if you have trouble growing grapes, the muscadines grow really well, and they seem to be less bothered by diseases and other issues. Now when you come into my main garden, and as we walk around, I'm going to show you why I think nature is amazing. I mean, aside from all this overgrowth, right in here is a tomato plant that's growing itself, and I'm going to let this continue to grow through September until the frost comes. No diseases, nice and healthy. These have not been sprayed, they've not been cared for, but they're producing nicely. Right in here is the end of my really arch and my tunnel for cherry tomatoes. These tomatoes have to be pulled out. We'll go in there in a second, but I have figs over there. Things are looking pretty good for September. I got some of my energy back, and I want to thank my friend Melissa, who came out and helped me weed the blueberry area. When we get to that, you're going to see that it finally looks video worthy. I don't mind it being a little bit messy, but it was just crazily overgrown. But as soon as the fall rolls in, or as soon as the cool weather rolls in, like September, my energy comes back. In here, more tomatoes that seeded themselves, and this is what I think is amazing about nature. I spend so much time, you know, spraying and tending and pruning tomatoes, different vegetable crops in here, but sometimes you can just let them grow, and you can see that the cherry tomatoes in there are producing. This is going to give me a nice harvest until the frost comes, and again, no spray on here, nothing. If you ever wonder what a tomato plant looks like if you don't prune it or trellis it upwards on a stake, it's just going to sprawl everywhere. Butternut squash doing well, interwoven with weeds and stuff like that. Well over 30 butternut squash coming off the couple of plants that I grew. These are going to last for 3 weeks. Getting my compost ready for next year. Those tomatoes are actually growing into compost. You can see why compost is so great. And one of the things that I want to mention maybe, Well, for sure, is compost is well below a 111 NPK. It's like a 0.01 or something. But it's low nutrients for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And it's just a slow, steady feed. That's what you want for your garden. So you don't need to have numbers that are jacked up like 24% nitrogen by weight, or 8 phosphorus, 10 potassium and stuff like that. That's more for our, I guess, need, is to see something that looks really potent and then we think it's going to do great things for our garden. And organic fertilizers do that, and fertilizers do that. But when I say you want to buy an organic granular fertilizer around a 555 NPK, up or down a few numbers, it's because you really don't have to worry about them. Compost, again, is well below a 111 NPK, and the reason it works so well is it provides organic matter, and it slowly gives the plants what they need, and that's all they need, is a continuous low supply of the nutrients that they want. I wanted to cut back in here for 2 reasons, then we'll come back to what I was talking about with the beans. I forgot 2 things. Number 1, I'm very excited to announce that Callie Kim, who you may have seen on my channel, or you may already follow her, she and I have started a podcast called Gardening Coast to Coast, and it is now available. I will put the link in the video description, along with the link to the original Muck Boot Company. But we have our first podcast out. It's all about starting your first vegetable garden. All of our podcasts are going to be about 45 minutes long, and we hope it's something you enjoy listening in the car or working in the garden. But we're going to do 2 or 3 a month, and one of them are going to be a Q&A. So if you want to leave your questions, we will give a shout out if we use a question in the podcast. But we want to answer, spend one podcast just answering all the questions you guys might have. The other reason is I want you to start a compost pile now. So this is some debris from this year right on top there. But over on this side is nothing but leaves. Last year I built this, filled it all the way up with leaves, and over the summer it is broken down to this. So composting doesn't have to be fancy. If you just want to make a bin, fill it with leaves, some cut grass, this fall, let it sit. By the end of next summer, it's going to be ready to use. So I'll be able to use all this in my garden, maybe later this fall or in the spring. But I just want to encourage you to get started. I just reached in there, and you can see how it's breaking down. So nothing fancy again. Why do I keep saying nothing fancy? Because we tend to overcomplicate things. Fertilizer is one of those things we overcomplicate when we're gardening. Pile of leaves, I left it alone, broke down from up here, decayed, broke down all the way down to there. I may put more leaves on this, use it in 2 years. I may use this next year, who knows? But if you don't get started, you're not going to have compost. You don't need anything elaborate like this. I mean, this is kind of fun. I've got the space, so I use it. But just get a bin and get started. All right, let's get back to that green bean. Right in here are green beans that seeded themselves. Somewhere down in there, there's some peas growing out of here from my spring crops. These beans will provide a harvest through September as I pull out my other plants that are beat up. And you kind of get the idea that sometimes the seeds that just fall to the ground tend to do best, because nature's been doing this for millions of years, a lot longer than humans have been growing. I think we've been gardening, I forget what number I saw. I want to say it was like, I don't know, 23,000 years, but that seems awful long. So at least 3,000 years. I will look up that fact. But we've not been gardening nearly as long as nature has. And if you just help nature along, your garden's going to want to give to you. I've been pulling potatoes out of here. This is basically my refrigerator that I'm using to store them, and I'm taking them out over the next couple of weeks and I'll eat them all. Pumpkin plants have mixed in with the tomato plants, and when you come down here, the pumpkins are doing pretty well. They're growing up the tomato plants, of course. I did spray the pumpkins with an antifungal. I just wanted to get them through August so that they grow well through. Let's take a look right here. That is a cucumber beetle right there. I think that's the spotted version. There's different cucumber beetles. There's striped beetles, spotted beetles. Either way, here's another one. They do cause problems, and some dust on these outer petals will take care of the beetles. You don't need to dust everything. You know, you put the dust out here, the cucumber beetles and the beetles are going to run through the outer leaves away from the flowers, contact the dust, and die off. That's a great way to manage them. So what I wanted to show you was the tomatoes over here are just being left now to vine and crawl and sprawl and do everything they want to do. And they look healthy too. They're not getting sprayed. You know, so sometimes we tend to overlove and over care for our plants. We don't hurt them, but we're just putting way too much energy into certain plants that we probably don't need to. You definitely have to have a spraying routine to manage fungus, diseases, and pests. And you have to know when to do that. Like for me, it's June, July, half of August, and then things kind of calm down. But you don't have to be out here every day putting something on your plants and worrying. This is a mistake, which I think is kind of cool. And maybe I'll do some more of these cylinders of old, I guess it was old fencing. This is actually from Freetown Farm. They have so much, they want us to take it away. I may drop those in here. This might just be a pumpkin patch that sprawls all over the place, up these cylinders, gives me more room, a lot easier to manage. I'll have to support any pumpkins growing in there, but it might be a way for me to maximize this space. I'm deciding now if I want to continue to put potatoes out here, which were really successful, if I want to do pumpkins, but how I would manage both and take care of them. In the process right here, well, I actually just shot a video, maybe you already saw it. I did a leeks video earlier, getting my fall crops in. These are for my fall vertical towers. I'll be doing a video on that. But things are growing nicely. Now that the heat is broke and the rain is slowed down, things are starting to take off and green again. Peppers, sweet potatoes, these should be fabulous. We'll see how that goes. Have carrots in there. I have more tomato plants to take out, like this one didn't make it. I have other ones that are thriving. Peppers are thriving, and sometimes, like, you know, we'll be out here and we'll be doing everything that we can, but you're just getting torrential rains if you're here where I live, crazy winds, high heat, humidity at 95%, and it's really hard to, one, sometimes be out here yourself to take care of the garden, but no matter what you do, the diseases still come in. You can see spots on the pepper leaves that came in with the humidity. They probably will be okay. When the plant gets stronger and the conditions are right, they'll be able to fight that off. Maybe I'll give them a little bit of a spray. Here's the transitioning area. The peas are doing really well. They were planted as seeds right in there. Where else do I have them? Some tomatoes that have to be picked. And like when the humidity comes in, my tomatoes start rotting really quickly. So I'll remove the tomatoes that look damaged, and over the next couple of weeks I should get some nice tomatoes. Peas right down in there. The lettuces are looking good. Swiss chard, it's being chewed up by snails, but I did put down the snail baits. You'll see some dust on here. The plants that don't have flowers, I don't mind using the insect dust. My second or third wave of zucchini is doing well. This is the only one that I'm keeping alive. I don't need a ton of zucchini right now. And there's a nice one right down there. So I'm able to get 1 or 2 a week coming off this plant. Showed you a lot of these from last week. Whole key with the kale is I'm not overplanting to the left and the right of it, just so that if I get any of the white flies or any kind of issues coming in late, I'll be able to treat it much more easily. Captain Jack's dead bug dust, you can use any kind of insect dust on there. There'll be no bees or any pollinators flying on here, so I like to leave this on for 2 days, clear out any worms that are being that are hatching and growing on here. The white moth is still around, still laying cabbage worms on here. I do get army worms, so this dust will take care of it. Tomatoes that I'm taking care of, I've been taking care of this black cherry tomato, growing this more as a hedge on the fence. You can see the tomatoes in there. This is a really prolific grower, producer, and it really does good against different diseases. So again, I've reduced the tomato plants that didn't really survive the July and August onslaught here, but I'm keeping a couple. This is the Homestead, letting it die off. It's kind of doing its thing. It's semi-determinate. I've already harvested about 15 to 20 tomatoes off of here. I'll be pulling these all off. More tomato plants. You get the idea. These are all keepers that I'll be growing next year because they really do manage the pests, diseases, and temperatures here. I love growing okra, but it produces so fast that the pods get large. You want to harvest them, as I've been talking about, when they're about this size. I just can't harvest them quick enough to really eat them. So maybe I'll just grow 2 plants next year instead of, I have, I think, 4 or 5 in here. I had some over here. You know, for spring of 2022, I'm really going to focus on growing what I can eat and give away to my friends and to family. I don't want to overproduce, and I'm going to grow different varieties of crops. Peas, Swiss charge, chewed up by snails and slugs. Snails and slugs on that. They just didn't make it into the ground. Plants are looking pretty good. The broccoli over here isn't growing as well as the broccoli over here, and that's because this casts shade onto the soil surface and it's really kept this cooler. If you look in here, if you have a good eye, sometimes cracking is just because the soil is drying out like that, but when it's raised, like a slight hill, I'll show you another example, sometimes that means you have moles, and I do have moles around here, but they're being managed okay. The the watermelon radishes are growing well. Those are turnips back there. I'll be thinning them all out. The group of peppers in here I'm taking care of. They're still producing, but really as the fall temperatures come and the night temperatures get colder, I'm going to see more leaf spots show up on here. These plants will weaken and die off. First wave of radishes producing mostly leaves. Other stuff coming up. Don't know if I'll get watermelon. There is a baby watermelon straight down there. I think I'm going to have at least 4 or 5, maybe 6 weeks before frost comes, so I think I will get a melon out of here. Cabbage in the back. Another example of the tomato plant that was growing in the compost. This is the other side. Just absolutely beautiful. No disease, no problems. And sometimes, I've said this before, when you are putting in later waves of tomato plants or different vegetables, they kind of grow through the disease period or the insect period, and they do really well. So lots of cherry tomatoes will come out of here. You might hear a lot of chainsaws in the background. Part of what we were getting were tornadoes around here. Luckily nothing fell close to me, but the winds get pretty bad, so trees are always falling around here. We're going to walk through there, show you some more plants that are growing on their own up there. This is a cucumber plant that I'm trying to bring back to life. I'll be doing a video on that. It's going pretty well. It looks like it's starting to come back, but there's a lot of soft-bodied insects on the undersides of the leaves that are chewing the leaves, and they make these marks. There, right there, and kill off the leaves. Walking through the remains of the tomato garden, corn, all that. Be doing an updated video, well, not updated video, but continuing the series on fall gardening in my vertical towers. If you want to subscribe, I'll be showing you how I set these all up and grow leafy greens and all your cool weather crops. Fall again is a great time to kind of recharge, get yourself, you know, back in the gardening game if you get burned out, which I think most of us do. Cool weather is much nicer for us to be out here, and you can grow all kinds of different plants. You know, they do really, really well. They need less care, in my opinion. This is the blueberry area that was just filled with weeds up to my hand. So we cleared most of these out. My friend Melissa, again, she helped out. I really appreciate that. So I'll be taking care of this. I'll be feeding my blueberry bushes with an acidic water-soluble fertilizer. They like more acidity, and I'm really trying to get these back to growth, and they're doing pretty well after the cicadas came in and really damaged them off. So spinning around here, well, more muscadines, sorry, right over there. Coming in this space, this was kind of left to grow out of control. Another tomato plant that seeded itself. I threw it over the fence. I could have more cherry tomatoes, and these just growing on their own. No care whatsoever. I think this is kind of cool. This is my cold frame that I dug out so that I can overwinter plants in there. So in here are little gallon containers where I had tomato plants growing that I never got out into the garden. Anyway, they rooted into the clay soil down there. Nothing fancy, solid red clay. They're getting all the nutrients, all the fertilizer that they need out of red clay soil. So again, we don't have to overthink putting all these expensive products into our soil for plants to grow. Anyway, these have been growing in here. They get enough water. You know, a little bit disease on the leaves, but I've been harvesting the cherry tomatoes right off of there. These are grape type tomatoes. Got to get into this section, clean it out. I've got trees growing in there and everything. Eggplant is starting to come back because I've been treating it and killing off the flea beetles. So you can take plants that are like really beat up, flea beetle damage, start taking care of them. They're going to start flowering again, and the leaves are going to come back and look really good. So you don't always have to pull your plants, but if they're beat up to the point where saving them just isn't worth it, go ahead and get rid of them. Let me walk over to here because I think this is a good place to end with, I think, you know, the power of nature. And the tomatoes look great. So I'm not going to have a shortage of tomatoes, and the ones that are hanging around are ones that I didn't really care for. In here, these are currant tomatoes that reseeded themselves in these little flower boxes, not getting any water whatsoever, and they survived. They're still growing. That is from one coming over the side. But your plants want to grow, they want to survive, they want to give back to you. And look, just tons of little currant type tomatoes in there growing from one plant in a little bit of soil, even though it can, you know, run out through this way. One of them died off, two of them are surviving, but no care whatsoever. And just imagine, for days, the sun baking down on here, drying this out, I'm not caring for it, and it's still growing. Here's another example. Here's a carrot. I knew that it would be twisted up, but carrot just grew in here that I must have dropped a seed. Did perfectly fine on its own. You can grow carrots in something like this. Just do a row of carrots. You don't have to overthink it. Everything doesn't have to be perfect in your garden. You see the different trellis designs? Now is a great time to start thinking about how you want to redesign your garden for next year. Maybe we'll just take a trip down here. These are plants that I started as bulbs, never got them into the ground. You can see some stuff dying off. These will all get planted over the next month. Now that it's cooler, you know, I'm not going to worry too much about them. I had to come out and water them all the time. I didn't want to let them die off, but I also just didn't feel like digging and putting them into the ground because it was too hot out and I wasn't sure of what space they were going to go in. But here's a quick look of my garden in transition from this side. Thanks so much for watching. Again, pick a few tomato plants that do well in your zone, make notes, and plant them every year. These are really fighting off the diseases that came through with minimal spraying. The black cherry is just out of control. It looks beautiful. Thanks for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. And if you're looking for holiday gifts, again, check out the original Muck Boot Company. They have every kind of garden shoe and boot that you might want to give to your fellow gardener. Thanks for watching.